They thought the old cabin in the woods was empty, but the silence was a lie. From the moment they stepped inside, something was already watching. Something that had never left. This is the chilling story of the night they realized. The cabin wasn't empty, and neither were they alone. It was a cold, quiet night in the middle of the woods. The air was heavy, filled with the smell of damp earth and pine trees. A narrow dirt road led to an old wooden cabin that looked forgotten by time. The windows were covered in dust, and the roof was half broken. From a distance, it looked like no one had been inside for many years. Four friends walked slowly toward the cabin. Their shoes crunched on dry leaves, and every step echoed in the silence of the night. The forest around them felt alive. The wind whispered through the trees as if warning them to turn back. But curiosity pushed them forward. When they reached the front door, they stopped. The cabin stood tall and dark, almost like a shadow. A strange coldness wrapped around them, even though it was summer. One of the friends, Ethan, put his hand on the rusty door handle. It felt icy, as if someone had just been holding it before him. He pushed the door open. The wooden door creaked loudly, the sound breaking the silence like a scream. Inside, the air was stale and heavy. Dust floated in the thin beam of moonlight coming through a cracked window. The room was filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. But something was strange. One rocking chair in the corner was slowly moving back and forth. No one had touched it. The friends froze. They looked at each other, their eyes wide. For a moment no one spoke. Then Sarah whispered, "Did you see that?" Her voice trembled. They wanted to believe it was the wind, but the windows were shut tight. The chair kept moving, creaking softly with each sway. A chill ran down their spines. It was clear now. The cabin was not as empty as they thought. And from that moment, they realized something terrifying. They were not alone. The friends slowly stepped inside the cabin, their footsteps making the old wooden floor groan under their weight. The air smelled like dust and mold, thick and heavy, as if no one had opened the place in years. Each corner of the cabin was covered in cobwebs, and the walls were cracked with age. At first it looked like just an abandoned place. But then Sarah noticed something unusual. On the far wall, just above the fireplace, were drawings made with crayons. Childlike drawings of stick figures, all with big black circles for eyes. Some of the figures were standing inside the cabin. Others were drawn outside, peering through the windows. "What is this?" Sarah whispered, pointing at the strange pictures. No one had an answer. The drawings were fresh, the colors still bright. They did not look old at all. But that couldn't be possible. Who would have been here to draw them? Ethan tried to laugh it off. "Probably kids from the town messing around," he said. But his voice didn't sound confident. As they walked further inside, a sudden thump echoed from upstairs. Everyone stopped. Their hearts raced. They looked up at the ceiling. The sound was slow, like footsteps dragging across the floor above them. "There's someone here," whispered David, his voice shaking. They wanted to believe it was just the house settling, old wood shifting. But the sound came again, clearer this time. Definite footsteps moving slowly, deliberately. The friends stood frozen, staring at the staircase that led to the upper floor. The shadows seemed deeper there, as if the darkness itself was alive. Suddenly, the rocking chair in the corner began to move again, louder this time. Back and forth, back and forth. The friends backed away, their breaths coming fast. Something was wrong. Something unseen was moving around them, watching them closely. The cabin wasn't silent anymore. It was speaking to them, and the message was clear. They should not have come inside. The group gathered near the staircase, their eyes fixed on the dark steps leading to the second floor. The sound of footsteps had stopped, but the silence was even worse. It felt heavy, like the entire cabin was holding its breath. Ethan took a deep breath. "I'll go first," he whispered, trying to sound brave, though his hands were shaking. Slowly, he placed one foot on the creaking step. Each sound echoed through the cabin like thunder. Sarah followed close behind, clutching her phone for light. David and Lily stayed at the bottom, too scared to move, but unwilling to be left alone. As they climbed, the air grew colder. Their breath turned white in the glow of the flashlight, even though it was summer outside. At the top of the stairs, a narrow hallway stretched out, lined with closed doors on both sides. The friends hesitated. The silence was broken only by the faint dripping of water somewhere in the distance. The wooden floor beneath them groaned, as if something unseen walked right behind them. Sarah reached for the first door and slowly pushed it open. The room inside was empty, but the walls were covered with more drawings. The same stick figures with black eyes. Only this time, the drawings showed 4 people standing in the hallway. Their clothes, their hair. It was them. Sarah gasped. "It's us." Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her back. His flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the beam caught something at the far end of the hallway. A tall shadow, too thin, too still, standing near the last door. David, from the bottom of the stairs, shouted, "Do you see that?" But when Ethan pointed the light again, the figure was gone. The hallway was empty. Or at least it looked empty. The friends stood frozen, their hearts pounding. The drawings on the wall seemed to stare back at them, as if the black-eyed figures knew exactly what was coming next. For the first time, they began to realize the truth. Whatever lived in the cabin already knew they were here. The hallway felt endless, each step heavier than the last. The friends stayed close together, their eyes darting from one closed door to another. Every creak of the floor sounded like someone walking just behind them. At the center of the hallway, Sarah noticed a tall, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. Dust covered most of it, but the glass still reflected faint shapes. Curious but nervous, she wiped part of the surface with her sleeve. At first, she only saw herself, pale, frightened, holding a trembling flashlight. But then her breath caught in her throat. Behind her reflection, a tall figure stood in the mirror's glass. Hollow eyes, no mouth, no movement. She spun around quickly, shining her light behind her. Nothing was there. Only Ethan and David staring at her with wide, confused eyes. "Sarah, what is it?" Ethan asked, stepping closer. She swallowed hard, pointing at the mirror. "Someone was there. I saw it." David leaned closer to look. His face turned pale. I see it too." The figure was back. In the mirror. It now stood between them, its long arms stretched low, fingers sharp like claws. But when they turned around, the hallway was empty again. Suddenly, the mirror cracked louder, a thin line running down the glass as if something inside wanted to break through. A cold wind rushed down the hallway, even though the windows were closed. The friends backed away, but the reflection grew darker. The figure's hollow eyes locked onto them, following their every move. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the glass shattered into pieces, the sound exploding through the hallway. Shards rained down across the floor, scattering like ice. The friends gasped for air, shaken and trembling. Did that just move on its own? Lily whispered from the stairs. Ethan shook his head. His voice was low, filled with fear. "No, it wasn't the mirror. It was watching us through it." The hallway fell silent again, but the sense of being observed never left. They all knew it now. The cabin was alive with something far beyond their understanding. The shattered mirror lay scattered across the floor, glittering like sharp ice in the dim light. No one dared to move at first. The silence pressed against their ears, heavy and suffocating. Then a sound broke it, slow, deliberate footsteps above their heads. Thump, thump, thump. Everyone froze. Their eyes lifted toward the ceiling, their hearts racing faster with each step. The sound was not random creaks of an old house. These were heavy footsteps, moving back and forth as if someone was pacing. "There's no attic up there, right?" Lily whispered from the stairs, clutching the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ethan shook his head. "There shouldn't be." His voice was barely a whisper. The footsteps grew louder, closer, almost as if whoever, or whatever, was up there knew exactly where they stood. Dust rained down from the ceiling, landing in their hair and clothes. Suddenly the steps stopped. Dead silence. Then a loud bang shook the house, as if something heavy had fallen directly above them. Sarah screamed, covering her ears. "Let's get out," David said quickly, his voice cracking. "This isn't right. We shouldn't be here." But when Ethan turned toward the staircase to leave, the door at the bottom slammed shut with such force that the walls shook. Lily screamed as she stumbled backward. The handle rattled violently, but the door wouldn't open. They were trapped. The footsteps started again, this time faster, running, back and forth, circling. The ceiling groaned and cracked, dust and tiny splinters falling like rain. The friends huddled together, terrified. Their breathing grew quick and shallow, filling the air with panic. And then it happened. From the ceiling above, long, sharp claw marks tore through the wood, scraping deep lines across the planks. The sound was unbearable, like nails on metal. Something was not just walking above them. It was crawling, dragging its claws, testing the thin barrier between them and it. For the first time, Ethan whispered the thought that chilled them all. "It knows we're here. And it wants us to know it's coming." The sound of claws dragging across the ceiling slowly faded, leaving only the friends' heavy breathing. The cabin felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in. Every shadow seemed alive, and every corner seemed to watch them. Ethan tried to stay calm. "We just need to find another way out," he whispered, his voice trembling. He led the group further down the hallway, searching for a back door or a window they could break. They passed another room. The door stood slightly open, a cold draft flowing from inside. Against their better judgment, Sarah pushed it wider with the tip of her fingers. The hinges squeaked painfully. The room looked empty at first. Dusty shelves, broken floorboards, and a single closet in the corner. The door to the closet was shut tight, though faint scratches covered its surface. Long, deep claw marks. "Don't open that," Lily whispered immediately, shaking her head. But Ethan stepped closer, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "We need to check. What if it's another way out?" He placed his hand on the closet handle. It was freezing cold, as if ice had formed on the metal. Slowly he pulled. The door creaked open, the sound dragging through the silence like a warning. At first, the closet looked empty, just old coats and a torn dress hanging from a wooden bar. Relief washed over them for a second. Then Sarah gasped. From the darkness, two glowing eyes blinked back at them. Low, animal-like breathing filled the tiny space. The coats began to sway, as if something hidden behind them was moving forward. Ethan stumbled back, nearly dropping his light. The glow from the eyes grew brighter, and a faint growl rumbled deep in the dark. Suddenly, the closet door slammed shut with a force so strong it rattled the walls. The handle twisted on its own, locking itself. The friends stood frozen, staring in horror. The thing inside was trapped, but it wasn't finished with them. In the silence that followed, the breathing continued, slow and heavy, leaking through the cracks of the wooden door. And then it whispered, low and broken, "Don't leave." The friends stumbled back from the closet, their faces pale with terror. The whisper still echoed in their minds, low, broken, and inhuman. No one dared to move. The only sound was the steady, heavy breathing coming from behind the closet door. Sarah clutched Ethan's arm. "We need to get out now. I don't care how." They hurried back toward the staircase, their footsteps pounding against the old wooden floor. When they reached the bottom, Ethan rushed to the front door. He pulled the handle hard. Locked. He pushed with all his strength, but the door didn't move. "Help me!" Ethan shouted. David and Lily grabbed the handle too, tugging with all their might. The wood groaned, but it wouldn't give. Suddenly, the house seemed to come alive. The windows rattled violently, the glass trembling as if about to shatter. Every door inside the cabin slammed shut one by one, echoing like gunshots. Bang! 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 The friends covered their ears. The lights from their flashlights flickered, shadows twisting and stretching across the walls. The cabin was sealing them inside. Sarah's voice broke through the noise. "It doesn't want us to leave." Then came a sound that froze them all in place. The sharp, slow sound of breathing, not from the closet this time, but from right behind them. They turned in unison. At the end of the hallway, something tall stood in the darkness. Its shape was barely visible, but its hollow eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. It didn't move, but the air grew colder with every second it watched them. Lily whimpered, holding her hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. The figure tilted its head slowly, almost curiously, as though it was studying them. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere in the cabin, it whispered, "You can't leave." The sound rattled the walls, shaking the house to its foundation. The friends clung to each other, trapped and helpless. The truth was undeniable now. Whatever haunted the cabin wasn't just watching them. It was keeping them. The cabin was silent, but the silence did not feel empty. It felt heavy, as if unseen eyes were staring from every corner. The friends stood close together, their flashlights shaking in their hands. Then, without warning, a small flame appeared. On the dining table in the middle of the room, a candle lit itself. The sudden glow pushed back the darkness, but instead of comfort, it filled the group with dread. Sarah whispered, "Who did that?" Her voice was weak, almost breaking. No one replied. As the light spread across the room, the friends noticed something strange. Around the table sat dark shapes, 6 faint figures. Their bodies were thin, their heads tilted unnaturally, and though their faces were pale, their eyes were nothing but empty black circles. The figures sat perfectly still, as if frozen in time, but every one of them was staring at the group. Lily's knees shook. "Please tell me you see that too." Ethan nodded slowly, his face pale. "I see them." The candle flame flickered, and one of the figures moved. Its chair creaked as it leaned forward slightly, the sound sharp in the silence. The friends gasped and stumbled back, their fear now uncontrollable. David clutched his chest. No, this isn't real. This isn't happening." The air grew colder. The candlelight stretched the shadows across the walls until they seemed to crawl upward, twisting into long, unnatural shapes. For a moment, it felt like the entire room was closing in on them. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the figures were gone. The chairs were empty, untouched. Only the candle remained, flickering quietly, as if mocking them. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. They were here. They were watching us. The candlelight sputtered, and before the flame went out completely, a whisper floated around the room. It was soft, broken, and came from every direction at once. "We're still here." Darkness swallowed the cabin again, leaving the group trembling in silence. The cabin was now completely dark again. The only sounds were the group's shaky breaths and the faint groaning of the wooden walls. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. It felt like even the air was listening. Then from the far corner of the room came a new sound, scratching. Slow, sharp, deliberate. Like claws dragging across wood. Screech, screech. The friends turned their flashlights toward the sound. On the wall near the window, fresh marks were appearing. Long, deep scratches carved themselves into the wood, though no hand or claw could be seen making them. Sarah's voice shook. "It's writing something." The group stared as the marks formed words, crooked and uneven, as though written by something angry. When the scratching finally stopped, one word was left carved into the wall. "Stay." Lily covered her mouth, holding back a scream. "It doesn't want us to leave." Before they could react, the scratching started again, this time on the ceiling above them. The noise was louder, faster, claws tearing through wood. Dust rained down onto their heads. Then the sound moved to the floor beneath their feet, circling them, trapping them. David stomped his foot down in panic. "Stop it! Stop it!" But the scratching only grew louder, sharper, as if mocking his fear. Suddenly, one of the walls split open with a loud crack. Deep claw marks stretching across the wood from top to bottom. The friends screamed and backed away, huddling together in the middle of the room. Ethan's flashlight flickered, and for a brief second they all saw it. Long, shadowy arms sliding across the walls, claws leaving fresh trails as they moved. The arms disappeared as quickly as they came, melting back into the darkness. The scratching stopped. Silence returned, but the word remained carved deeply into the wall, glowing faintly in the dark. "Stay." It was no longer just a warning. It was a command. The cabin seemed alive now. Every wall carried fresh claw marks. Every corner whispered with unseen voices. The friends stood trembling, trapped in the center of the room. The word carved into the wall, "Stay," seemed to glow like burning fire. Ethan clenched his flashlight. "We can't stay. We have to fight our way out." His voice was shaking, but his eyes burned with desperation. He rushed to the front door again, slamming his shoulder against it. This time, the wood cracked. The others joined him, pushing and kicking with all their strength. The cabin roared in anger. The windows rattled, the ceiling groaned, and the whispers grew louder. "Don't leave," the voices hissed, echoing everywhere. Suddenly, the candle on the table flared up one last time. The black-eyed figures appeared again, standing now closer, circling the friends. Their hollow eyes glowed in the flickering light. Sarah screamed, "It won't let us go." The figures moved closer, their pale faces only inches away. Cold air wrapped around the group like invisible hands. With one final cry, Ethan slammed into the door again. The wood shattered, bursting open into the night. A rush of cold wind and rain hit them as they stumbled outside. They didn't stop running. Through the wet grass, through the thick trees, they ran until their lungs burned and their legs nearly gave out. Finally, they collapsed on the roadside, gasping for air. Behind them, the cabin stood dark and silent, as if nothing had happened at all. But Sarah's eyes widened. "Wait," she whispered, her voice breaking. The others followed her gaze. In the cabin's window, faintly glowing, 6 pale faces stared back at them. They hadn't escaped. They were still being watched. And deep inside, they knew the truth. The cabin would never let them go completely. Because once you step inside, you belong to it forever.